WGXA first interviewed McDaniel the day after Lauren Giddings was reported missing in June of 2011. Reporter Michelle Casada found him standing outside the apartment building where he and Giddings had lived, and that we now know was the scene of the crime. He talks about joining Giddings' friends to look for his law school classmate and how they entered her apartment to see if there was anything wrong. It was also the first time McDaniel found out that a portion of Lauren Giddings' body had been recovered by police from the dumpster where he had put it. Knowing now that McDaniel had...
In today's story, we uncover a case far more terrifying than any horror film. A real-life nightmare that began when a brilliant young law student suddenly vanished without a trace. This is the haunting story of Lauren Giddings, a woman whose life was filled with promise, love, and ambition, until everything came crashing down in the most horrifying way imaginable. Lauren Teresa Giddings was born on April 18, 1984, in Tacoma Park, Maryland. She was the oldest of 3 sisters, deeply loved by her parents and siblings. Friends described her as kind, disciplined, and full of faith, a woman driven by a desire to help others. That passion led her to pursue a career as a public defender, determined to stand up for people who couldn't afford legal representation. To achieve her dream, Lauren moved to Macon, Georgia, and enrolled at Mercer University's Walter F. George School of Law. She quickly excelled in her studies and became president of the Federalist Society, earning the respect of both professors and classmates. During an internship in Atlanta, she met David Vandiver, who would become her boyfriend. The couple maintained a long-distance relationship after Lauren returned to Macon, and they planned to get married once she completed law school. By the summer of 2011, Lauren had finally graduated at the age of 27. The only thing standing between her and her dream job was the bar exam, which she was studying for diligently. For weeks, she immersed herself in preparation, taking only a brief break to attend her younger sister's wedding in Maryland. After the joyous celebration, she returned to Macon, joined a few close friends for a small end-of-year gathering, and then announced that she would be locking herself in to study intensively for the next few days, asking not to be disturbed. That was the last anyone ever heard from her. Before we continue, welcome to Crime Uncovered, where every case has a story, and the truth is often stranger and darker than fiction. If you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to hit that button to stay updated on the latest true crime cases we uncover. And to our returning subscribers, thank you for your continued support. Don't forget to like this video so it reaches more people who care about the truth behind the headlines. I would love to know where you are watching from. Drop your country in the comments below. So back to the case. At first, her family and friends thought she was simply focused on studying. But as the days passed, the silence became unsettling. On June 29th, a few days after she was last seen, Lauren's sister began to worry. She had been on vacation and sent Lauren some pictures from her trip, but the messages went unopened. Calls went unanswered. Texts remained unread. That was when her sister knew something wasn't right. Concerned, she reached out to one of Lauren's close friends, asking her to check in on her. The friend called several times, but each one went straight to voicemail. Finally, she and her boyfriend decided to drive over to Lauren's apartment, located in a small student housing complex right next to Mercer University. The first thing they noticed when they arrived was Lauren's car, still parked outside, just as it had been for days. When repeated knocks brought no answer, the friend, who had a spare key, hesitated but eventually let herself inside. The apartment was a mess, but not in a way that immediately raised alarms. Boxes and bags were scattered around the floor, as Lauren had been planning to move in with her boyfriend, David, the very next day. But something didn't add up. Her purse, phone, laptop, and even her car keys were still inside. It was as if she had vanished in the middle of her routine, leaving everything behind. The friend began calling people who might have seen or heard from Lauren. Soon, others joined the search, combing through the college grounds and nearby streets, calling out her name. But she was nowhere to be found. When Lauren's family in Maryland learned what was happening, they immediately drove to Georgia to help. Friends continued searching late into the night. But when morning came and there was still no sign of her, they knew something was terribly wrong. That was when they called the police. When officers arrived at the complex, they searched Lauren's apartment thoroughly, but found no sign of a struggle or forced entry. Everything looked strangely ordinary except for the fact that Lauren was gone. Still, the officers could feel something was off. To be safe, they called in forensic experts to look deeper. The specialists sprayed luminol, a chemical used to detect traces of blood, across the apartment. Nothing appeared unusual until they reached the bathroom. The moment the light hit, the entire bathtub glowed a haunting blue. It revealed that someone had recently tried to clean up a large amount of blood. The discovery changed everything. The police began to fear the worst. There was far too much blood for anyone to have survived. The investigation shifted instantly from a missing person case to a probable homicide. As an officer stood outside the apartment building, he caught a strong, unmistakable odor, the foul scent of decomposition. Following the smell, he walked toward the row of trash bins behind the building. The closer he got, the more unbearable the stench became. When he lifted one of the lids, his heart sank. Inside a large black trash bag was the torso of a woman. The head and limbs were missing, but officers immediately suspected it was Lauren. They decided to keep the discovery quiet for the time being to avoid compromising the investigation. What made this find even more chilling was the timing. The trash truck had been scheduled to arrive within minutes. A simple parking issue had delayed the pickup, allowing police to uncover the remains before they were lost forever. As detectives waited for confirmation of the victim's identity, they began collecting background information from Lauren's family and friends. That was when they learned something deeply disturbing. In the weeks before her disappearance, Lauren had been complaining about strange occurrences in her apartment. She often returned home to find items moved around, yet her doors were always locked and there were no signs of forced entry. At times, she even felt as if someone was watching her. The situation made her so uneasy that she bought a door security bar for extra protection. Despite her precautions, the strange disturbances continued. Lauren's boyfriend David, who lived out of state, tried to reassure her that it was probably just neighborhood pranksters. But within days, she was gone. Police quickly ruled David out as a suspect. He had a verified alibi and was nowhere near Macon at the time of the murder. That left them searching for other leads. Forensic teams combed through every inch of Lauren's apartment, collecting fingerprints and trace evidence. But the place had been scrubbed clean with strong cleaning products. They even removed the entire bathtub to send for lab testing, hoping to recover DNA. Soon, medical examiners confirmed what everyone feared. The torso found in the dumpster belonged to Lauren Giddings. The estimated time of death was June 26th, 3 days before she was reported missing. The cause of death couldn't be determined, and there were no signs of sexual assault. As investigators began questioning neighbors and classmates, they hoped someone might have seen or heard something unusual. The apartment complex where Lauren lived mostly housed Mercer law students, a quiet, close-knit group. Many residents knew each other by name, including Stephen McDaniel, a shy, awkward young man who lived directly across the hall from Lauren. Stephen was a fellow law student who had just graduated alongside her. To most people, he came across as socially reserved, sometimes even strange. He was known for his nervous demeanor, often avoiding eye contact or engaging in long-winded conversations about obscure topics. Lauren had been friendly toward him, as she was with most people, but they were not close friends. Still, because he lived so close, detectives wanted to hear what he had to say. That morning, while police were still at the complex, reporters from local news outlets began arriving to cover the breaking story. They started interviewing residents outside the building. One of them approached Stephen, who seemed eager to talk. On camera, he appeared visibly shaken.
Lauren was my neighbor. We're just trying to find out where she is at this point. I mean, no one has seen her since Saturday. I mean, the last time anyone heard from her was an email that she sent out, and no one's heard from her since.
Did you see her hang out with anyone at the time or anything like that?
I mean, no one has seen her since Saturday. I haven't seen anything. I mean, I've always heard noise outside, but it's just people walking by pretty much.
And she just recently graduated from Mercer?
Yeah, she and I we were both JD students. We graduated back in May,
What kind of person was she? I mean, what did you see?
I mean, she's as nice as can be. I mean, very personable, very much a people person.
Do you know anybody any enemies she might have had, somebody that might want to hurt her?
No, we don't know where she is. I mean, the only thing we can think is that maybe she went out running and someone snatched her. Because, I mean, we went over, one of her friends had a key, we went inside and tried to see if there was anything amiss, but, I mean, she had a door jamb that was sitting right by it, so there was no sign that anyone broke in. I mean, the door was locked when everyone got here. I mean, we just don't.
Police were already growing suspicious of Stephen. They had noticed inconsistencies in his story. During earlier questioning, he claimed he hadn't seen Lauren for days, but several witnesses said they'd seen him loitering around her apartment building, even peeking into her windows. Officers also noticed he seemed unusually interested in what police were finding, repeatedly asking, "Have you guys found anything yet?" When detectives went to his apartment, they found him cooperative but nervous. He allowed them to take a quick look around, though it didn't take long to notice something strange. The inside of Stephen's apartment was cluttered, almost chaotic, but what caught their attention was the absence of any cleaning supplies, despite the faint smell of bleach lingering in the air. The officers didn't find anything overtly incriminating during that first visit, but they did notice that his bedroom window directly faced Lauren's. In fact, it was close enough that someone could easily observe her movements if the blinds were open. One of the detectives quietly noted the angle, realizing that whoever killed Lauren might have been watching her for some time. As the investigation deepened, police canvassed the surrounding area and found surveillance footage from a nearby building. Late one night, just before Lauren's disappearance, a figure resembling Stephen was seen walking toward her apartment, wearing dark clothing and gloves. Although the footage was grainy and unclear, the man's build and gait appeared similar to Stephen's. Still, investigators needed solid evidence, something undeniable. So, they obtained a search warrant for Stephen's apartment. When they returned a few days later to execute it, they found Stephen sitting quietly, seemingly emotionless. As officers entered, he asked softly, "Do you think she's dead?" The chilling calmness in his tone unsettled everyone in the room. During the search, detectives made several alarming discoveries. In a storage area, they found a small master key that fit multiple apartment doors in the complex, including Lauren's. They also found a pair of black gloves, a package of surgical masks, and a hacksaw blade missing from its handle. The handle itself was discovered in a nearby trash bin, later confirmed to match the blade. Even more disturbing, investigators located a flash drive belonging to Lauren in his possession, containing her personal files and class materials. When questioned about it, Stephen claimed she had lent it to him. But friends insisted Lauren was extremely careful with her belongings and would never have given away something so personal without mentioning it. As police gathered evidence, Stephen's behavior grew increasingly erratic. He stopped cooperating, refused to answer basic questions, and seemed to crumble under the weight of pressure. Detectives decided to bring him in for formal questioning, hoping to unravel the truth. During the initial interrogation, Stephen appeared calm but detached. He spoke in a flat tone, avoiding direct answers. He insisted he didn't know what happened to Lauren and maintained he hadn't been inside her apartment for months. But when detectives confronted him with the discovery of the hacksaw and the matching handle, his composure began to crack. His breathing quickened, his eyes darted, and he repeatedly asked to leave. Then came the turning point. As investigators continued to press him, Stephen fainted in the interrogation room. He fell to the floor, trembling and muttering incoherently. Officers called for medical assistance, and once he recovered, he was taken to jail, this time not as a witness, but as the prime suspect in Lauren Giddings' murder. Outside the police station, word spread quickly. The same neighbor who had cried on camera just days earlier was now accused of killing the woman he claimed to be searching for. Students at Mercer University were horrified. Reporters flooded the area, replaying the eerie interview that now seemed to carry a sinister undertone. What had once appeared to be shock and grief now looked chillingly like the moment a killer realized he had been caught. But detectives still lacked one critical piece, a confession. And as the days went by, Stephen McDaniel continued to maintain his innocence. What unfolded next would expose a dark obsession that had been hiding in plain sight all along. Following his arrest, Stephen McDaniel was taken into custody at the Bibb County Jail, where detectives continued to question him about Lauren's death. Despite the growing pile of evidence, Stephen stuck to his story. He insisted he had nothing to do with her disappearance or the discovery of her body. But detectives were far from convinced. They began to piece together a profile of who Stephen really was. Not the quiet, harmless student many thought they knew, but someone far darker. Stephen had graduated from Mercer Law alongside Lauren. But unlike her, he had no job lined up. He lived alone, had few friends, and spent most of his time online. Investigators soon discovered that he had an unhealthy fixation on Lauren, one that had spiraled into a dangerous obsession. When officers searched his computer and external hard drives, they found hundreds of disturbing files. Among them were covert photographs of Lauren, taken without her knowledge. Some showed her through her window, changing clothes or sitting at her desk. Others were pictures of her apartment taken from angles that could only be seen by someone standing directly outside her window or door. There were also videos and search histories filled with violent and pornographic content, including material about stalking, breaking into homes, and how to dismember a body. The more detectives uncovered, the clearer it became that Stephen had been watching Lauren for a long time. He knew her routines: when she left for class, when she went jogging, and when she turned off the lights at night. He had been planning something horrific long before the night she disappeared. Despite the mounting evidence, Stephen continued to sit silently in the interrogation room, staring blankly ahead. Detectives tried various approaches: gentle questioning, aggressive confrontation, even silence, but he barely reacted. His lack of emotion was chilling. At one point, when officers played back his own TV interview, showing the moment he heard that a body had been found, he didn't flinch. He simply said, "I don't remember that." But the investigators were relentless. They reminded him of the hacksaw blade found in his apartment that matched the handle discarded in the complex trash bin. They mentioned the luminol results showing extensive cleaning in Lauren's bathroom. They told him about the DNA evidence that was likely to come back soon. Still, Stephen sat motionless, repeating, "I didn't do anything." When pressed about why Lauren's flash drive was in his room, he claimed she had lent it to him weeks earlier. When asked about the master key found in his possession, he said he had found it lying on the ground and decided to keep it. Every answer sounded rehearsed, mechanical, like a man trying to think his way out of a noose tightening around his neck. Eventually, detectives decided to take a different angle. They began asking him about his life, his background, his time at Mercer, and his future plans. Stephen talked about his grades, his law degree, and how he wanted to be a lawyer. But when they mentioned Lauren's name again, his tone shifted. He spoke about her in an oddly detached way, calling her a nice girl and saying she was always polite. Then, without emotion, he added, "She probably wouldn't have liked me anyway." That one statement caught the detective's attention. It revealed something deeper: resentment, rejection, and envy. Over the following days, Stephen's behavior in jail became increasingly erratic. He refused to eat, wouldn't speak to guards, and often sat staring at the floor for hours. At times, he muttered to himself, lost in thought. Detectives began to suspect that his silence wasn't guilt alone. It was calculation. He was waiting, perhaps hoping that the evidence against him would fall apart. But it didn't. Forensic analysis soon confirmed that Lauren's blood and tissue were found on the hacksaw blade recovered from Stephen's apartment. DNA tests also revealed Lauren's skin cells under his fingernails. Even without a confession, the case against him was becoming overwhelming. Still, prosecutors wanted him to admit what he'd done, not just for the sake of conviction, but to give Lauren's family the truth they deserved. They had endured unbearable pain, traveling from Maryland to Georgia to face the reality of their daughter's murder. Each day, they sat through briefings and press conferences, hoping for answers. Then, nearly 2 years after Lauren's death, the pressure finally broke Stephen. In 2014, faced with the undeniable mountain of evidence, Stephen McDaniel agreed to a plea deal. In exchange for avoiding the death penalty, he would plead guilty to murder and provide a full confession describing what really happened that night. The details were horrifying. Stephen admitted that in the early hours of June 26, 2011, he used the master key to quietly enter Lauren's apartment while she slept. Dressed in dark clothing and gloves, he crept inside and watched her for several moments as she lay in bed. When she suddenly stirred, realizing someone was there, he lunged at her. Lauren fought back fiercely, scratching and struggling to free herself, but Stephen overpowered her. He placed her in a chokehold, tightening his grip until she stopped breathing. Once she was dead, he left her body in the bathroom and returned to his own apartment, only to come back later with a hacksaw. In his confession, Stephen said he dismembered Lauren's body in her bathtub, placing her remains in plastic bags. He disposed of her torso in the complex's dumpster and attempted to scatter other parts nearby, though most were never recovered. He then cleaned the entire apartment with bleach and disposed of the saw handle to hide his tracks. When asked why he did it, Stephen's response was chilling in its simplicity. He said he had been curious about what it would feel like to take someone's life. After his confession, the courtroom fell silent. Even the seasoned investigators who had worked the case were shaken by his calm description of the events. Lauren's family wept quietly, clutching each other for strength. The young woman who had dreamed of becoming a public defender, who believed in justice and fairness, had been brutally murdered by someone she had considered a harmless neighbor. In April 2014, Stephen McDaniel was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As he was led away, he showed no emotion, no apology, no remorse, just the same blank stare that had haunted detectives from the beginning. Even after his conviction, Stephen McDaniel continued to haunt everyone connected to the case. The image of the quiet law student, pretending to be a worried neighbor on live television, became one of the most disturbing portrayals of hidden evil. That chilling interview, filmed just hours before Lauren's body was found, still unsettles viewers today. Prosecutors later described the case as one of the most gruesome and heartbreaking they had ever encountered. Detectives admitted they could never forget the horror of discovering Lauren's remains or the coldness in Stephen's demeanor. Lauren's family, though devastated, focused on preserving her memory instead of the darkness that took her life. Her parents, Bill and Karen Giddings, spoke about her compassion, her dedication to justice, and her dream of becoming a lawyer who fought for what was right. Mercer University later honored her through the Lauren Giddings Memorial Scholarship, helping students who shared her drive to make a difference. Friends and classmates held annual candlelight vigils in her name, remembering not just her tragic death, but the warmth, kindness, and ambition she embodied. Meanwhile, Stephen McDaniel began a new chapter behind bars, filing appeals to overturn his sentence. In 2018, he claimed his confession had been coerced, that police intimidated him, denied him basic needs, and that his lawyer failed him by pressuring him into a plea deal. But the court rejected his appeal, ruling that the evidence was overwhelming and his confession voluntary. Still, he persisted. In 2022, he filed another motion for a new trial, again claiming injustice. That motion, too, was denied. A few relatives continued to insist he was framed. His father even tried to raise funds online for new representation, but the campaign quickly failed. To most, the evidence left no room for doubt. Today, Stephen McDaniel remains in a Georgia state prison, serving life without parole until at least 2041. Though even then, his chances of release are almost non-existent. For Lauren's family, justice brought closure but not peace. They continue to mourn the daughter they lost, a woman full of promise, kindness, and strength, whose story stands as a stark reminder of how evil can hide behind the most familiar faces. The Lauren Giddings case endures as one of the most haunting crimes in modern American history. Stephen McDaniel wasn't a stranger in the dark. He was the neighbor who smiled politely, the classmate who blended in, the man who acted like he cared. Lauren's story is a lesson in intuition and awareness, proof that sometimes the people we trust most are the ones we know least. Even after a decade, her memory echoes through the halls of Mercer Law School and the hearts of those who loved her. In the end, Lauren's light, her compassion, intelligence, and determination, continues to shine brighter than the darkness that tried to silence her. Thank you for watching. Every victim deserves their story told. If you found this story shocking and heartbreaking, subscribe to Crime Uncovered and help keep their memory alive. What do you think about this case? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Until next time, keep questioning everything.